Tonight, the threat at home that Vladimir Putin chooses not to speak of. After 20 people were killed in attacks on places of worship in the Republic of Dagestan, we ask if Russia could be facing a renewed threat from Islamist militants. Right now, no group has claimed responsibility, but Russian officials are blaming terrorists, sleeper cells, and Ukraine. All the while, Putin stays silent over religious tensions. But will that calm concerns as battles rage at home and abroad? His job made harder by this attack in Crimea. Moscow says Ukraine and the United States were jointly responsible and vowed to respond. The big question tonight, how they do that. Plus, what caused this towering inferno in Moscow that left at least 8 people dead? We'll have the latest. Also ahead, we're live in Gaza after Israel announced plans to move its troops out of Rafah. We hear from the father of missing teenager Jay Slater, who says police in Tenerife are keeping his family in the dark. And from the England manager Gareth Southgate, how will his team handle criticism of their Euros campaign so far as they prepare to face Slovenia?
We're a high-profile team with expectations, and we fully understand everything we do is going to be scrutinised.
Good evening. After 25 years in power, few things seem to dent Vladimir Putin's all-powerful image. The former KGB agent styles himself as Mr. Security, but that reputation just suffered a blow. An attack in the southern Republic of Dagestan has left at least 20 people dead. Places of worship and police checkpoints were targeted. But who did it? So far, no one's claimed responsibility. Some Russian officials are blaming Islamic extremists, others Ukraine. But the president is yet to point the finger. We do know that Islamic State has previous form with attacks in Dagestan, a largely Muslim area. And most notably was behind the Moscow concert attack in March, in which 145 people died. But even then, the Kremlin said the attackers had links to Kiev. That narrative seemed a much easier sell to an audience growing anxious over national security. The Dagestan attack happened a year to the day of the unprecedented rebellion by the Wagner mercenary group. While the threat was neutralized, it was an embarrassment for Putin. And perhaps its legacy lives on. Tensions have been high in Dagestan since last October, when the war in Gaza broke out. Rioters waving Palestinian flags broke down glass doors and rampaged through Makhachkala airport to look for Jewish passengers on a flight arriving from Tel Aviv. Now, another incident leaves Russians questioning just how safe the state is. A group of armed men shot at a synagogue and a church in the city of Derbent. Almost simultaneously, reports appeared about an attack on a church and a traffic police post in the Dagestan capital, Makhachkala. Our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett, has this report.
There's a lot we still don't know about this attack, which continued long into the night. It apparently ended with a shootout in the grounds of Dagestan's main Orthodox cathedral. But who the gunmen were and their wider affiliation is still unclear. That hasn't stopped some from making a surprising conclusion, though, that foreign forces were involved.
Further operational search and investigative measures will continue until we've identified all members of these sleeping cells, which were certainly prepared, including from abroad.
Sergei Melikov is the regional governor and visited the scenes of the attack today. A church where a 66-year-old priest is said to have been brutally murdered, and a synagogue that was set alight. He didn't provide any evidence for his claim of foreign involvement, and he's not the only one asserting it. The local MP insists there's no doubt Ukraine and NATO are connected. But as this predominantly Muslim region begins 3 days of mourning, others are less sure. It recalls previous attacks by a homegrown Islamist insurgency the FSB said they defeated in 2017. But there's a fear it's returning.
It's clear that a threat from radical Islamism in Russia is increasing. the main goal of this terrorist attack was not just to kill some governmental authorities, but to provoke anti-Muslim pogroms in Russian cities.
It comes 3 months after the deadly assault on Moscow's Crocus City Hall. Over 140 people were killed in Russia's worst terror attack in 20 years. It was claimed by Islamic State, but that didn't stop the authorities from blaming Ukraine. And as we've seen here, there are similar attempts, because it helps to reinforce the wider narrative that Russia's under attack from the West. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
So how big a threat to Russia is Islamic extremism, and is President Putin paying enough attention? Well, I'm joined now by Leon Aron, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He's also given evidence to the US House Foreign Affairs Committee about the threat of Islamic extremism in Russia. Thank you very much, Leon, for joining us here on the programme. I mean, I think historically what we've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, but terrorist attacks in Russia have been on schools, for example, on concert halls most recently and in the past. But rarely do we see places of worship attacked.
That's correct. The so-called high-value targets, if you remember, 2001, a theater, 2004, Beslan, a horrific attack, and most children died in a school. The downing of the Russian airplane over Egypt, and so on and so forth. Yes, the Domodedovo airport. This is a very rare attack. Actually, there was one in Dagestan a few years back in 2018, but on a much smaller scale. It was a lone wolf attack on a church, Orthodox church. So I think it shows that the Russian jihad is now veering closer to the Islamic State, specifically, I think, Islamic State, so-called Vilayat, Khorasan, or Islamic State K, largely based in Afghanistan, northeastern Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, versus the largely, yes, with a religious element, but largely Chechen-based fundamentalism, militant fundamentalism, which was essentially attacking high-value civilian targets and trying to make its point that way. I think we're seeing the increase of the religious element here.
Yeah, and yet, you know, the Kremlin is trying to play it all down, aren't they? I mean, I'm looking here at pro-Kremlin media playing down a claim from Al Azam Media, Russian language channel, which is associated to ISIS-K, you know, and they're sort of trying to point the finger of blame at external forces, and some have even named Ukraine, for example.
I think total nonsense. Anything wrong happening in Russia is blamed on Ukraine and NATO. This is the dominant propaganda narrative by the Kremlin. There is really no evidence. They're trying to replay the same propaganda narrative as the one 3 months ago after the March attack on Crocus Center near Moscow. In any way you cut it, it just does not seem to be in the interest of either NATO or Ukraine to organize such attacks.
And yet they keep doing it, as you say. The theatre attack, which left 145 people dead, they tried to say it was Ukraine rather than, I mean, Islamic State, ISIS-K themselves claimed responsibility, and yet, the Russians were also given intelligence from the Americans, and yet the Kremlin insisted that it wasn't any kind of terrorist organization. It was Kiev. As you say, it feels very much, sort of convenient to now point towards Kiev for all of these incidents. But do you think that the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin, they're not taking this threat of ISIS-K, Islamic extremism, these terrorist attacks seriously enough?
Well, I think they're killing two birds with one stone here. For one thing, the idea is, well, we're at war with Ukraine, which to Russia, to the Kremlin propaganda is a war with NATO and the West, primarily the US. And so that war is now, as by the way, the head of the region of Dagestan already said, we're at war and the war does have no borders. And so we're attacked in Ukraine and we're attacked here. But I think what it does in a more proximate way, more immediate sense for the Russian audience, is to show that there's really no protection against something that is thought of or plotted by the West. That kind of takes the blame off the obvious culprit, which of course is the incompetence or lack of intelligence research by the Russian FSB, secret police, or the Russian National Anti-Terrorist Center. And so, Putin is caught between these two propaganda narratives, and I think they decided that it's safer to blame the West rather than to admit that either because of the war or because the attention of the Kremlin is now entirely on Ukraine, there is a weakening of the anti-terrorism expertise and activity in Russia.
Yeah, I mean, you have to question the competence of it, because even when the Americans, before the Moscow terrorist attack on the concert hall, gave them intelligence and said this could happen, they ignored it and then tried to point the finger of blame on the West anyway.
Well, not only that, but a few days before the attack on the Crocus Center, the one that you mentioned in March, Putin said the West is trying to provoke us by saying that there is going to be an attack domestically. This is all done to destabilize Russia and to sow discord among the various nationalities of Russia, which of course are completely united behind the Kremlin. So I think he's trying to push that narrative again.
Yeah, I guess, Leon, I also want to ask you about this idea of ISIS-K and its stronghold now in Afghanistan. Is this going to become a problem not just for Russia, but the West as well going forward?
Absolutely. In fact, Emmanuel Rahmon, who is the president of Dagestan, I don't know if it's something to brag about, but he said in the past few years, 10 European states were attacked by the total of 24 Tajik nationals. This is a country of 10 million people. So it becomes the single largest purveyor of a former Russian republic, of course, of terrorism, not just in Russia, but throughout Europe. And that Velayat Khorasan, or the Islamic State of Khorasan, has just congratulated, I believe you mentioned this, congratulated its brethren in the Caucasus. And apparently we now have Velayat Kavkaz, which is Islamic State of Kavkaz, operating there. It is not at all good news either for Russia or for Europe.
Yeah, as you say, a concerning development there. Leon Aron, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
Now, another developing story around Russia. The US ambassador in Russia has been summoned over a Ukrainian attack on Crimea, which it says was carried out using advanced missiles supplied by Washington. Video shown on Russian state TV captures what sounds like explosions as people run for cover on a beach in Sevastopol. Russian officials say 4 people, including 2 children, died in the attack on Sunday. The Russian Foreign Ministry has said there will be retaliation. Well, despite that threat, the Biden administration is tonight expected to announce it's sending munitions worth $150 million to Ukraine to help fight off Russia's attacks. Well, let's get more now from our US correspondent, James Matthews. And James, thank you so much for joining us. So there are a few things we do know, and then there are a few things that we're trying to better understand. We know that for the last couple of years, the US has supplied weapons to the Ukrainians to defend themselves. We don't know what sort of weapons, when the Russians say were used in Ukraine. They say they were American weapons. And we also know that President Biden has almost given a green light to the Ukrainians to be able to target Russian soil.
Yeah, under certain circumstances, Yalda, and this, of course, took place in Sevastopol in Crimea, which Russia claims as its own, having annexed it in 2014. The rest of the world begs to differ and very much views it as Ukrainian. To that extent, it falls within the parameters of the United States instructions to Ukraine. By all means, use our military hardware, but don't go anywhere near Russia. The Americans and others know that down that road lies serious escalation. So the news we're getting and the detail is coming from the Russians at the moment. The Americans certainly are not confirming any of what the Russians have had to say about this attack. But it took place in Sevastopol. What happened, according to Moscow, is that 5 missiles were shot from the air, and falling debris is what caused the damage, killing 4 people, including 2 children, and injuring 151 others. The Russians are pointing the finger at Ukraine and the United States, saying that these missiles were indeed US supplied and also guided using data by the United States. So Moscow fully implicating Washington in this particular attack. And they have summoned America's ambassador in Moscow, and she has been told that this attack will have consequences, retaliatory consequences. What these are, the Russians aren't saying. But Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, has alluded to something that Vladimir Putin said on the 6th of June, talking about the possibility that Russia might place conventional weapons in regions close to the United States and to US allies. In the language of the Russians, the United States, according to Moscow, is waging a hybrid war against Russia and has actually become a party to the conflict. I think Russia's reaction to this clearly indicates their concern at the impact of American support, the military hardware, which once again is making its way to Kyiv. In terms of American reaction, the Pentagon this morning was saying that the targeting of any missile fired by Kyiv is down to Ukraine alone. So limited reaction from the Pentagon. We did hear a little more from the State Department in the form of their spokesman, Matthew Miller. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We lament any civilian loss of life in this war. We provide weapons to Ukraine so it can defend its sovereign territory against armed aggression. That includes in Crimea, which of course is part of Ukraine. And Russia could stop this war today and end the suffering caused by the war Russia launched today if it would stop its occupation of sovereign Ukrainian territory and stop launching attacks on civilians.
That was Matthew Miller there, the State Department spokesperson. And James, you know, as we kind of enter debates and conventions, how much of a talking point is Ukraine for the presidential candidates?
I think it's huge, Yalda. And we were 3 days short of the first TV debate, Thursday night, 9 p.m. local time, Trump versus Biden, political fight night. It will be one of the central issues because Biden's stewardship as the leader of the free world, as Americans would style him, is very much an issue. Republicans have made it a campaign issue so far, striking a contrast that they see between Biden, a man who presides over a world on fire, conflicts raging throughout the world in which he is involved and unable to bring under control. They contrast that, Republicans, with Donald Trump, as they would have it, the political strongman and when he was in office, they make the point that you didn't have this degree of conflict, that he is the political strongman who would bring the world's warmongers to heel. So it's bound to come up in the debate, given that debates traditionally, certainly according to the template of times past, are an exploration of the record of the incumbent. So they will be looking closely at Biden's record in office come Thursday night, and Ukraine will be central to it alongside, the other key subject areas like abortion, immigration, crime, America's place in the world generally. Biden will be ready, I might say, for Ukraine to come up as a subject area, and he may well have his answers prepared, because Donald Trump, you'll remember, said he could end the Ukraine conflict in one day. He said that very publicly. What he's not said publicly is what he's been discussing privately, how he would do that. And according to reports here, he would do that by giving up territory to Vladimir Putin, possibly Crimea, possibly parts of the Donbass. So for Joe Biden to be attacked on Ukraine, I suppose, in the context of a debate, merely has to explore that with Donald Trump. Ask him the question, well, you say you would end this war in a day. Tell me how you would do that. Who is the strong man now, given that you're going to give up territory? In a debate that will be won and lost probably on viral moments, Yalda, that could well be the most viral of all.
Indeed, and you'll be following all of that for us from Thursday. Thank you so much, James, for that update. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of Moscow, a fire at an office building has killed at least 8 people. Video shows people leaning out of the windows of the high-rise building as smoke billowed out. More than 100 firefighters and 40 vehicles were sent to the scene about 15 miles northeast of Moscow. Russia's emergency ministry says the blaze caused interior structures to collapse. Now, let's just bring you a little update on the French elections, and we're expecting the first round to be this Sunday. President Macron has told a podcast in an interview that he has done that both the far-right National Rally Party and the left-wing New Popular Front coalition, the front runners in the parliamentary election, risk bringing civil war to France. So a warning there from the French president, who called this snap election following the results of the European elections. And in a way, many commentators are saying it has backfired on the French president. His centrist alliance is seen in third place according to polls at the moment. And according to those polls, his party could win about 19.5% of the votes, and the far-right National Rally Party could win as many as 35.5% of the vote. And the turnout rate is expected to be between 60 and 64%, much higher than the 47.5% seen at the last general election in 2022. So a warning there from French President Emmanuel Macron, saying that a civil war could take place in France. There was risk of it because of the far-right National Rally Party and the left-wing New Popular Front coalition party. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, we'll be getting a live update on the situation on the ground in Gaza after Israel announced plans to move its troops out of Rafah.
We know that one of the best bits of being on holiday is playing in the swimming pool and being around water. And it's really important that you do everything you can to keep your children safe. And that's why we've launched this campaign today, because we know that there are certain colours of swimwear which are not safe in deep water in particular. So there's 3 things that we're doing with this campaign that we're launching today. Firstly is to raise awareness of the issue. So colours that can't be seen in the water are blues, whites and light greys. Secondly, we're asking parents to really think about the colour of swimwear that they pack for their children for their summer holidays this year. So think about bright colours, oranges, greens, reds, neons, lots of options out there. And thirdly, we're asking everyone to sign our petition. It's on change.org today, calling on the government to legislate really against these unseeable colours, because as we said, they really are invisible in deep water and in swimming pools. And actually most swimwear that parents own is in exactly the worst colours for child safety. So 2/3 of parents know that their children are likely to be wearing navies, blues, whites and greys. So really it's a chance for us to spread this message today and ask people to check their swimwear, have a look at the brighter colours you've got, maybe swap with other families if you need to for holidays, or perhaps even buy some new swimwear to make sure your children are as visible and as safe as possible this summer. And we haven't yet found a retailer that is not selling those dangerous colours. So really, it's a real opportunity for parents to do that little extra thing. As you say, it's quite, there's a lot to think about, isn't there, on holiday anyway? Hard to keep your eye on 2 children at the same time, or 3, or however many you've got. So every little bit you can do to help keep them safe, we think is worth knowing about and worth doing this summer. We had an article that was shared with us last year, actually, on the subject, and it was quite unbelievable, which is why we redid the research ourselves to see for ourselves how much of an issue this is. And as you saw from the pictures, it really is difficult to see those colours in the water.
Welcome back to the programme. The Israeli Prime Minister says the intense phase of fighting in Rafah is coming to an end, freeing up troops to be sent north to the Lebanese border. In an interview on Israeli television, Benjamin Netanyahu said the war in Gaza is not over, and in stark language, he said his military would continue to, quote, mow the grass another time.
השלב העצים של המלחמה בחמאס עומד להסתיים.
The intensive phase of the war with Hamas is about to end. That doesn't mean that the war is about to end, but the intensive phase of it is about to end in Rafah. After that, we will continue mowing the grass. We won't give up to them. By the way, yesterday, it's possible that we eliminated, we don't know yet, the number 4 in Hamas. We are beating them and beating them strongly.
Benjamin Netanyahu there. Well, let's get an update on the situation on the ground in Gaza. I'm joined now from Gaza by Arwa Damon, a former CNN senior international correspondent who founded the International Network for Aid, Relief and Assistance, or INARA. Thank you so much, Arwa, for joining us here on the programme. You've been in Gaza for the last week or so. Just give us a sense of the situation on the ground.
You know, it's really hard to encapsulate, and everyone keeps asking what it's like, and it's quite indescribable, as you know, you've all been hearing. There are so many compounding issues that exist here now that weren't even around, say, for example, 2 months ago. You've got a serious increase in looting and criminal activity. And what this means is that even when the few aid trucks are able to actually cross into Gaza, the one road that Israel has designated for use for humanitarian trucks moving from the Kerem Shalom border crossing to the rest of Gaza, well, that route right now is fraught with danger. So aid trucks are basically, you know, running this crazy sort of gauntlet. And there is this underlying ominous sense that everyone talks about, expressing their concerns and fears over, you know, the eradication of, you know, the social fabric of society, of people's moral code, because desperation is really reaching these, you know, inexplicable levels, and there is absolutely no rule of law. And everything, of course, is compounded by just even the simplest thing, Yalda, is a difficulty, whether it's trying to scrap around for food or wait in line for water or figure out how to get medicine. Look, the other day we took 2 or 3 days just to track down insulin for this little girl. And in that time frame, she actually ended up being briefly hospitalized. And then it wasn't just enough that we were able to get her the insulin. Then there's the added challenge of how to figure out the refrigeration for this insulin, because obviously you don't have refrigerators and electricity inside these tents. I mean, it's just problem on top of problem on top of problem. Nothing is easy or simple.
Well, because nothing really exists anymore, Arwa. Just give us a sense of just, we talk about hospitals destroyed. We talk about the lack of equipment. You're on the front lines of it with your aid organization. I've been tracking your trip there and watching what you're posting on social media. I mean, just give us a sense of, you talk there about the desperation, but you're right there on the front lines, seeing especially the suffering of these children.
And what makes that all the much worse is that there have been no medical evacuations for around 2 months now, ever since the Rafah invasion happened, closing the Rafah border crossing, which was the only route for medical evacuations. And what you have now is roughly 10,000 or more people who need to be medically evacuated. A significant number of them are children. I met 2 little boys in the hospital, both who have severe abdominal injuries. One of them in particular, his urethra is detached from his bladder, and he's very, very prone to infection. These hospitals are not sanitary places anymore. Flies are everywhere. People are just packed in on top of each other. And doctors there tried to do the surgery for him twice and were unable to do so. He needs to get out. The little boy that you're looking at there in all of that footage. I met a little girl whose aunt was with her, effectively saying that when they found her in the street after an explosion, her intestines, her guts had all spilled out. And she's sitting there, this little girl, and she's kind of rocking back and forth in pain, and her aunt is trying to comfort her. And the reason why it's her aunt who's there comforting her and not her mother is because her mother and her father are dead, only she doesn't know this yet. You go out into the streets, you see children who are working, you see children who are running around with no shoes next to open sewage. You see, children who are coming after you just begging and asking for anything. And then you see children who rarely interact, and their parents are extraordinarily worried about their psychological state of mind. Children who have seen their siblings, decapitated in front of them because of these explosions. I met a teenage girl whose older brother, who she was very close to, he bled out basically in her arms because they spent a day underneath the rubble, trapped there before rescue teams could arrive.
I mean, this is the story of a few children that you're telling us, but we're talking about thousands of children impacted by this conflict. They've become orphans. They, as you say, I mean, the child that you're talking about left with an aunt, and that little girl is probably one of the luckier ones because she has her aunt.
Yeah, and this is why we have this horrible, acronym that came out during all of this very early on, actually. Wounded child, no surviving family. And there are an estimated roughly, 21,000 children, according to Save the Children right now, who are either unaccompanied, disappeared, or believed to be buried underneath the rubble. And when you drive around these areas, you really understand why it is that there's such a high number of missing, not just children, but people to begin with, because entire buildings have evaporated into dust. Others are completely and totally pancaked. All of the floors have just collapsed on top of each other, and the kind of heavy machinery that you would need to move all of this, it just doesn't exist in Gaza. And then there's the added concern of unexploded ordnance. I was in Khan Yunis a few hours ago today. We took around 2.5 hours to go a distance that should have taken us 20 minutes to try to deliver 2 tents to this one family. And they had decided to pitch their tent in the rubble because people, generally speaking, are also afraid to come to a location like where I'm at right now, Deir el-Balah, because the big fear is, Deir el-Balah hasn't had a ground incursion yet. Deir el-Balah hasn't gone through what, Khan Yunis, Rafah, and a lot of these northern areas, Gaza City has gone through. So Deir el-Balah is going to be next. People would rather go to Khan Yunis and live in the rubble under the hypothesis of maybe I won't have to move again than, risk coming here. But living in those conditions poses huge risks as well. And when it comes to safety, security, hygiene, cleanliness, and access, to aid and then access for aid organizations, not to mention the little aid that is coming in. Look, whenever something comes in, it goes straight out, but it has been weeks and weeks that we as INARA have not actually been able to receive anything into Gaza. Now, we did manage to, along with a partner organization, the Global Empowerment Movement, get our hands on some sanitary pads for women, and we were distributing them the other day. And yes, people are grateful. Women are so grateful for this because they can't afford to buy them in the market. They've been ripping off cloth. But at the same time, everyone's asking us for hygiene products, for clothing, for children's shoes. And your voice catches in your throat when you have to say, I'm sorry, we actually have this ready. It's just stuck in trucks outside of Gaza. And I promise you, I swear, the minute that we get it in, we're going to start distributing it. But right now, this is all I have.
Yeah, just totally heartbreaking stuff. Arwa, we're so grateful that you're there and that you have been able to join us on the programme and give us a sense of the reality on the ground. Thank you so much for joining us. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, teams searching for British teenager Jay Slater narrow their efforts to 2 structures at the bottom of a ravine in Tenerife. Welcome back. The search for the British teenager Jay Slater is entering its second week in Tenerife. The 19-year-old vanished after making a phone call to a friend last Monday morning after getting lost on the way back to his accommodation. From Tenerife, Sky's Shingi Marurike reports.
He's holding on to hope with everything he has. But Warren Slater's search for answers has gone on for more than a week, and it's taking its toll. In the town of Santiago del Tido, on the outskirts of the national park where his son went missing, Warren and a group of Jay Slater's friends think he was spotted. So they've taken matters into their own hands, leaving a trail of posters here, asking anyone with information to come forward. The teenager was in Tenerife for his first holiday abroad. He'd been at a music festival on Sunday night, before he travelled to a villa with two men, disappearing hours later. Jay's family say they reported a possible sighting of him on CCTV walking through this square, but that would have been a difficult journey of about 7 kilometres from the search area to this town. Jay's family say this still is taken from the footage in question, but it's yet to be confirmed by the Spanish police. Today, officers were surveying the scene, but the search does seem to be scaling down. It's a case shrouded in speculation and interest. Paul has travelled here from the UK and says he's here to help.
I heard on the internet that they needed help. I was following the story and I wasn't planning to come out, but as soon as I heard they needed help, that's when I came out. It's a search and rescue. The more people that are involved, the better it's going to be.
There are still so many questions about what happened, why he came here, and most importantly, where Jay is now. Those who know and love him just want him back. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Tenerife.
The England manager Gareth Southgate says he is oblivious to criticism of his team's performance at the Euros so far. He was speaking at his side as his side prepared to take on Slovenia tomorrow for a place in the knockout stages. Despite disappointment in how the team have played, England are currently top of their group. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports.
They're almost certain to be staying in Germany. Where England head from here at the Euros, the result against Slovenia will determine that. But the way England have been playing, a win is no certainty. And the Denmark draw still has Gareth Southgate on the defensive.
We're a high-profile team with expectations, and we fully understand everything we do is going to be scrutinised. So I'm very comfortable living that life. But I don't need to engage in external because I'm my own biggest critic. We know what we've done well. We're very honest about that. We know where we need to be better.
Southgate is concerned his players might not be fit enough. Now they're set to play in the hottest conditions so far at the tournament, the high 20s. Against a Slovenian side trying to qualify from a group for the first time at a tournament.
They're going to come at us. They're going to want to win the game. They're going to want to shock the world. And tomorrow's a chance for us as a group to bounce back from the other night.
England are unbeaten with 4 points from their first 2 games.
England were booed off the pitch against Denmark, but despite the performances being underwhelming, the fans are in good spirits here in Cologne ahead of the meeting with Slovenia, and the players know they need to raise their game and apply more pressure.
The hope is Southgate can turn it around, but these fans are not convinced by his tactics.
I think the game goes like Gareth's personality, very chilled, easygoing, but what he needs to do is give them a bit of an oomph and get going. That's what they need to do.
They've got to get in and
they've got to attack rather than
hanging
defend.
back all the time.
Yeah.
So it's just getting a boring game. They need to up the come on. Yeah.
If England don't go through as group winners, the route to the final becomes tougher, and the wait for football to come home could go on for the Three Lions. Rob Harris, Sky News, Cologne.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, with Taylor Swiftmania sweeping the UK, we'll be discussing the phenomenon and just what goes into putting on her era's tour show night after night.
Coming up on Sky News at 10, details of the alleged plot to kidnap, rape and murder TV presenter Holly Willoughby. The political parties are accused of a conspiracy of silence over tax and spending choices after the election. Plus, Gareth Southgate's plans for England at the Euros tomorrow. That and more, do join me at 10.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone, I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News at the Old Bailey.
And I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
Welcome back to the programme. Now, I want to talk about the global phenomenon that is Taylor Swift. Her Eras Tour has been boosting countries across the world. Japan's economy was more than $200 million better off for having her, while in the United States, the boost was reportedly $5 billion. Well, in recent days, it's been the UK's turn. And I do have a bit of a confession to make. I was there last night, but just have a listen to this. Incredible. Well, the gigs have been attended by royalty, politicians, and of course, die-hard Swifties. The tour is already the highest grossing in history and is reportedly projected to boost the UK economy by almost £1 billion. Well, let's bring in my guests for this evening. I want to discuss the impact of the so-called Swiftonomics across the world and hear from a fan on what makes the artist so special. With me here in the studio is a Swiftie, Anna Rees, who was at last night's gig at Wembley, and we're also joined by music industry economist Chris Carey. Thank you both for joining us here on the programme. Anna, like I said in my intro, I was there last night, so I was suddenly privy to almost 90,000 people and the joy that Taylor Swift brings to all of you.
The atmosphere is absolutely fantastic. I mean, she is just a global phenomenon. I don't think we'll see another like her in this generation. It's a whole saga. I mean, people who aren't Taylor Swift fans have been saying, you know, I need to get my hands on this ticket.
It was like the most sought after ticket in London. And I sort of realised the dedication and the love for her. But she's selling a sort of a message of hope and dreams and that sort of thing, isn't she?
She is. I mean, I think she's selling a whole arc of a story. She's gone from this country girl who was very wholesome, very light-hearted, and she's moved through pop and into a more electric sound. And now she's bringing us the Eras tour, which is sparkly and it's pink. So she really does cover every emotion. My friends and I were saying on the way home, there's not a feeling you can have that Taylor Swift doesn't have a song about.
It's amazing. Well, I'm going to bring in Chris. Chris, you know, I have to confess, I mean, I haven't seen anything like it. The way that she was able to capture, you know, the imagination of the audience there, young and old, was quite something. And she's done this right across the globe.
She's done this in an unbelievable fashion. She has taken people who are not even music fans need to be in that room. There's more to this than just music itself. You've got a phenomenal moment there, and being there with everyone in that moment, in this time, is something really remarkable and was something well worth not missing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that she was able to do it night after night, just tell us what goes into something like this, because, you know, there's the cost of the tickets, but then there's so much more that sort of works towards the economy of a place.
Yeah, well, certainly the economic impact within the stadium. You've got people running lights, you've got people running backstage, you've got a pile of staff, you've got a pile of temporary staff coming in, running bars, running the security. And then, of course, you've got people travelling in. And so you've got travel expenses, you've got hotels, you've got kind of any of the food and beverage that might happen outside the stadium, might happen inside the stadium as well. You've got plenty of opportunities to spend money while having a fantastic time over a very long show from two amazing acts as well, not just from Taylor.
I mean, when you look at the entertainment industry and the economics of it, when was sort of the last time that we could sort of say compare to a Taylor Swift and what she brings to the economy of a place?
I think for sheer impact, you're going to struggle for a comparison point. I think for what she's done, the scale she's done it at a global level, partly helped by the inflation of ticket prices. So post-COVID, a lot of restrictions on what you could charge for a ticket were lifted in terms of industry perceptions. So the industry's done a much stronger job of monetising what would normally have been secondary market sale. And so normally tickets would sell at a high price, but it would happen outside of the ecosystem for the industry. And there's been better pricing, which has helped allow the incredible production you see, all the things happening behind the stage, and that kind of almost festival euphoria that goes around just a single show.
Yeah, I mean, as I said in my introduction earlier, you know, royalty, politicians, we've got some of those images. Let's just bring them up onto our screens, because we saw Prince William with Princess Charlotte there, and Keir Starmer was there as well. I think Kate Blanchett was there at one point. You know, it was kind of anyone who was anyone was there, right? And how hard was it for you, Anna, to get a ticket?
Well, some Swifties have been calling it the Great War, the battle to get a Taylor Swift ticket. It was tense. It was tense. A year ago, I was working, so I had a friend who was able to work from home using a code to get the tickets, and there were two of us on the hunt, so we had a backup system. But when we had our tickets, you know, the rush is there, and there was this incredible build-up for a year, seeing it tour America. I do think in England, it was a little bit better organised than the stories we've seen from Swifties in America. Some people saying it was $5,000 plus for tickets. Yeah. So it was a tough battle, but it paid off.
Have you ever felt this way about any other artist?
I have never. I first felt that I connected with Taylor Swift music when I was very young. I was about 9 years old. And I really connected with her because I think she just writes about the simple, genuine feelings that so many young women like myself have, that we're often made to feel that we're being silly or frivolous for caring so much about breakups and falling in love and making new friends, moving to a new city. But Taylor Swift just expresses that so beautifully, and she gives a voice to that, which is why I think, you know, she is the icon that she is, because she's speaking this voice that so many young women share in.
And Chris, I mean, just briefly, we've heard from Anna there about, you know, her significance and why it matters to her. But I guess it also helps, you know, when she arrives in a country and the ticket prices, but also the food that people buy, the hotels, and as you say, the entire production.
Yeah, well, I think as well for music itself, to have a moment as big as this before Glastonbury is quite rare. You normally have a bump in the music industry when Glastonbury happens, it gets all the TV presence, all the attention. And it's so nice to have a music moment ahead of that, where people get excited about music in an economy that hasn't been very exciting of late. It's very nice to have something to get excited about.
Yeah, very much so. Chris, Anna, thank you both for joining us here on the programme. Well, that's all for tonight's programme. The news at 10 is next, with more on the alleged plot to kidnap TV presenter Holly Willoughby, and a health update on the Princess Royal after she was concussed. We'll be back again tomorrow at 9 p.m. Good night.